So I thought I'd go back and check out one of my all-time favourite Assassin's Creed, and that is Origins. It's definitely a game that revolutionised the franchise, let's say, from Syndicate, in terms of how much content there was, and just all the new RPG mechanics and their open world exploration. They also took a 2-year gap between them, I believe, which was unusual at the time because they'd always do yearly launches, and it looks like now they do that, where it's every 2 years or so. So it introduced a lot of new mechanics, and as I said, with it being an RPG open world game this time, it means just a character, they have way more control over their skills and upgrading weapons and armour, but most importantly just more to explore, whether that be the landscapes themselves or the bunch of side quests and activities inside of them, with random characters to interact with, and just fully get lost in this world. There was also new combat mechanics to learn and more to use in fights, and just learning the enemy's weaknesses, as there's quite the variety with even more as you play due to the leveling system and your character. If you couldn't tell, it's all taking place in Egypt and many different areas to explore, like the deserts and their towns. It still looks incredible, and it's crazy how much detail they put into this setting, even down to the small bits like the interior and like the prop design in some random building. And I think I noticed it even more this time round. And yes, there is the iconic landmarks like the pyramids and the Sphinx. One of the main criticisms I've heard is probably the difficulty of some of the missions in the game, especially for newer players, and more so the combat system just being a bit unforgiving at times because of the whole leveling system, where when you're basically the same level as the enemy, it's still a bit of a challenge even on easy mode. And especially if you're below the level, which does make sense as it tells you a recommended level to be. And then you may have to do extra stuff to reach it, and maybe some players just aren't a fan of that. You can, however, have the option to boost your character up 45 levels if you don't want that hassle, and if you're more of a casual player, which I actually did myself, but then with Odyssey and Valhalla I stuck to just leveling up. So it's cool that there is that option, because people that have played every game before this, they might not like a leveling system in the game, and just that aspect alone can throw people off, and they never play the game at all. Then there's some others that think the story is a bit all over the place, and again it might have, just been coming from Syndicate, which is way more linear, and now we have these smaller paths and these story arcs jumping all over. It then also leans into a repetitive feeling of some of the game's quests. And this is just for some players. I didn't really think this, but I just think because of how many there are in the game and it was such a bigger game, it was kind of, expected that some were going to repeat themselves a bit. But as I said, personally I didn't quite think they were that bad, and I found the game both time arounds quite addicting in a way, which I don't always feel like that. The game has had a few expansions and DLCs like the Curse of the Pharaohs, also ones like the new Discovery Tour mode they had, which they kind of followed on in Odyssey and in Valhalla, and that just means it allows the player to explore the world and the setting's history without any combat. So yeah, it's more combat driven and way more open world, whereas the games before, they focus more on stealth and the whole assassination aspect. It might not be for everyone, but they seem to still be going down that route after Odyssey and Valhalla. And then Mirage was like one last nod to the older games, and now we have Shadows, of course, which I might do a video on next year after it's been out for a year. So it's down to personal preference. For me, I just like having change in the series, and I'm so glad they expanded the games out, but sometimes it may go a bit too far from the actual assassin part of the title, especially in Valhalla, but then again I still didn't mind that game for the most part. If you didn't know how the whole leveling system works, it's really just from completing quests and taking down enemies to then gain XP, and then you level up and gain more abilities. And each level has a new skill point to use on one of the 3 skill trees, that being Warrior, Hunter or Seer, I think. So Warrior, that focuses on general melee combat, and then Hunter focuses on like ranged combat and stealth. And then the final one focuses on like exploration and basically just anything else. Like there's one to make time speed forward. And as you progress through, of course you get better gear and weapons, all with different levels to them, as well as small bonuses to them as well, so you can always switch it in and out. So general weapons, shields, bows and armor. If you have Ubisoft Plus, you can actually get the deluxe of the game, or some different edition, and it gives you some better items to start off with. I think they also worked on the leveling system to mainly encourage people to explore the world more and take their time with it, so it's not rushed. Just going back to the combat as well, it featured a new hitbox system, and it made it way more strategic and made you think more about how you approach them, whether that be in stealth or just rushing in with your melee or a ranged attack with your bow. Also the adrenaline system was another thing, and it helped a lot. And again, it's a huge change from the other games in the series, and that just means it builds up at the bottom as you attack, and then it just gives you a huge buff when you use it, and it can also help to do chain attacks. A big thing about the series as well, it's always been about parkour, and probably what I thought of before checking the series out. In this one, it is fluid, but it's by no means the best in the series. It does feel quite smooth in terms of like animation, and it's fairly responsive. I think it's more just a bit repetitive, and comparing it to other entries again, which had way more variety in their jumps and their climbing, especially with us having to traverse further distances in these type of games. Of course, they do have the mounts as well, which they push a lot more, but there's definitely big areas where you can use parkour the entire time. And looking more into the story of the game, just to give a brief summary, it all follows Bayek as he tries to get revenge against who killed his son, but then it also looks into the origins of the Brotherhood as well, which sets up more events. Bayek is one of my favourite protagonists ever, and what really made the narrative better for me. I just love seeing that character development in him and his overall just motivation. It comes off quite well. He becomes way more serious as well and focused later down the line, and you definitely do notice it. It's just quite satisfying to watch it all unfold. And there's some comedic moments in the game as well, and yes, a bunch of side characters, but also quite memorable, I think. I mean, I can see why some might find it confusing, but I didn't mind it. The thing with Assassin's Creed as a franchise, and what I've learnt from these videos, is that every game is also one that offers hours of gameplay, especially the newer ones, of course. And some of them, yes, are better than others, but I think for any beginner and casual player, I always recommend any of these games, as they're so easy to pick up and they offer a huge amount in all of them. They aren't as groundbreaking as like a Witcher 3 or Red Dead 2, but they're still fun, you can just choose which setting you like best, and then dive right in, and every time I've returned to one and done a video on it, they always do quite well, so there's definitely proof of that. And it still has a massive fan base, clearly, with new people playing all the time, but also old players returning. And if there's anyone that's watching who have only played the old games and want an RPG style game to get into, I say this is the one I definitely recommend first. I mean, it is my favourite. I think it's the best one out of the 4, and the easiest to pick up, I think. And who knows, maybe you'll prefer this style and play the other ones. So if you did enjoy this video, that was me returning back to AC Origins. Let me know by tapping that like button down below, and if you enjoy single player and multiplayer titles as well, then that's what this channel does focus on. I have many playlists on a selection of games, so you can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. If you want to support me any further, then you can become a member of the channel at either level 1 or 2 to gain access to various perks. Thank you all for the support and watching until the very end. That was Assassin's Creed Origins in 2025, and bye bye.